The transport ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and Station Kepler 442 appeared in the viewport. Jake Morrison pressed his face against the glass and stared at the massive structure floating in space. It was bigger than anything he had ever seen. The station stretched for miles in every direction, with docking bays that could fit entire cities inside them. Jake took a deep breath and tried to calm his nerves. He was the first human ever selected for the Galactic Defense Initiative training program. Earth had only joined the galactic community 6 months ago, and most aliens still didn't know much about humans. Jake was here to represent his entire species, and the weight of that responsibility sat heavy on his shoulders. The docking process took another hour. When Jake finally stepped off the transport, he found himself in a massive hangar filled with recruits from dozens of different species. His eyes went wide as he took it all in. There were Vraxians, massive creatures that stood nearly 8 feet tall with 4 powerful arms and skin covered in scales that looked like metal plates. They moved with confident, heavy steps that made the floor vibrate. Next to them were Kelthons, shorter but broader, with natural armor covering their bodies like the shell of a beetle. Their exoskeletons gleamed under the station lights, and Jake knew from his briefing that those shells could stop plasma rifle shots. Zephyrites darted between the larger species, moving so fast they were almost a blur. They were built like runners, all lean muscle and long limbs, and they never seemed to stand still. There were at least 20 other species that Jake didn't recognize, each one looking more impressive and dangerous than the last. And then there was Jake, 5 foot 10 inches tall, weighing about 180 pounds with no natural armor, no extra arms, and no special abilities that he could see. He wore the standard recruit uniform that had been sent to Earth, and he carried a small bag with his personal items. Compared to everyone around him, he looked painfully ordinary. A massive shadow fell over him. Jake looked up and up and up until he met the eyes of a Vraxian who had to be at least 7.5 feet tall. The alien looked down at him with an expression that Jake couldn't quite read. "You are the human?" the Vraxian asked. His voice was deep and rumbling, translated into English by the neural implant that all recruits received. "Yes, sir," Jake replied. "Jake Morrison." The Vraxian tilted his massive head. "I am Commander Vokthor. I oversee training for new recruits." He paused, and Jake could have sworn he saw something like concern in those alien eyes. "Human, I must be honest with you. This training program is designed for warriors. It is extremely difficult and dangerous. Perhaps your people did not fully understand what they were sending you into." Jake straightened his back and met the commander's gaze. "With respect, sir, I knew exactly what I was getting into. I'm ready." Vokthor studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. Follow the others to the orientation hall. Your training begins tomorrow at dawn." Jake joined the flow of recruits moving through the station. He couldn't help but notice the looks he was getting. Some aliens stared at him with open curiosity, like he was some kind of exotic animal. Others looked at him with what he could only describe as pity. A few seemed amused, as if his presence here was some kind of joke. A Kelthon bumped into him, nearly knocking Jake off his feet. The alien didn't even notice, continuing on without a backward glance. Jake steadied himself and kept walking. This was going to be harder than he thought. The orientation hall was enormous, with seats designed to accommodate the wildly different body types of the various species. Jake found a spot near the back and sat down. A few moments later, a Kelthon sat down next to him. The alien's armored body barely fit in the seat. "You are human?" the Kelthon asked. "That's right," Jake said. The Kelthon made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. "I am Kriegnak. I have heard of your species. You have no armor, weak bones, and you die if you go too long without consuming food and water. Is this true?" Jake felt his face get hot. "We're tougher than we look." Kriegnak laughed again, louder this time. "Soft skin, I could break you with one hand. This will be entertaining to watch. I give you 3 days before you quit and go home." Before Jake could respond, the lights dimmed and a holographic display appeared at the front of the hall. Commander Vokthor's image appeared, larger than life. "Recruits," the commander began. "You have been selected from thousands of candidates across the galaxy. You are here because you represent the best your species has to offer. The training you will undergo is the most demanding in known space. Many of you will fail. Some of you will be injured. But those who succeed will become part of the most elite military force in the galaxy." The hologram changed, showing images of past training exercises. Jake watched as recruits fought in hand-to-hand combat, ran through obstacle courses that looked impossible, and operated advanced weapons and vehicles. Everything looked brutal and exhausting. Tomorrow, Bokthor continued, we will begin with basic physical assessments. We need to understand the capabilities of each species represented here. Get rest tonight. You will need it. The hologram faded and the lights came back up. Recruits began filing out of the hall, heading to their assigned quarters. Jake followed the crowd, checking the data pad he had been given for his room assignment. He found his quarters on level 43. The room was small but functional, with a bed that adjusted to fit his human frame, a desk, and a small bathroom. Through the window, he could see the stars stretching out into infinity. Jake sat on the bed and pulled out his personal tablet. He had a message waiting from his family back on Earth. His mother had sent a video telling him how proud she was and how she knew he would do great things. His father had added a note at the end. Remember, son, it's not about being the strongest. It's about being smart and never giving up. Jake smiled and set the tablet aside. His father was right. He might not be the biggest or the strongest recruit here, but humans had survived on Earth by being clever and adaptable. They had learned to thrive in every environment on their planet, from frozen tundras to scorching deserts. They had built civilizations and reached for the stars without any natural advantages. He lay back on the bed and closed his eyes. Tomorrow would be the first real test. He knew he would probably rank last in most of the physical assessments. The other recruits would laugh at him. They would think he was weak and helpless. Let them think that, Jake decided. He had nothing to prove to them yet, but he would. Humans didn't give up and they didn't back down from a challenge. He would show them what his species was really capable of. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, Jake dreamed of home and of the future he was here to help build. The alarm woke Jake at what his body insisted was 3 a.m, though time worked differently on the station. He dragged himself out of bed, splashed cold water on his face, and put on his training uniform. The material was strange, some kind of alien fabric that adjusted to his body temperature and moved with him like a second skin. The training grounds were located in a massive section of the station that had artificial gravity set to galactic standard, which was slightly higher than Earth normal. Jake felt the difference immediately. Everything felt just a little bit heavier, including his own body. Hundreds of recruits were already assembled when he arrived. They stood in loose groups organized by species, and Jake noticed that he was the only human present. He walked to an empty spot and stood at attention, trying to ignore the stares. Commander Bokthor appeared, along with several other instructors representing different species. One of them was a Kelthon named Selmy, who Jake learned was a decorated combat veteran with scars on her armor to prove it. Today we assess your physical capabilities, Bokthor announced. Each of you will complete a series of tests. These will establish your baseline scores. Do not try to show off. Do not try to hide your weaknesses. We need accurate data. The first test was strength. One by one, recruits approached a machine that measured how much weight they could lift. The Vraxians went first, and Jake watched in amazement as they lifted weights that had to be measured in tons. Their forearms worked in perfect coordination, and they made it look easy. The Kelthons went next, not quite matching the Vraxians, but still lifting incredible amounts. Even the Zephyrites, who were built for speed rather than strength, managed to lift several times what Jake estimated he could handle. Then it was his turn. Jake approached the machine and gripped the handles. He took a deep breath, set his feet, and lifted. The weight came up, but it was hard, very hard. When the machine recorded his score, Jake saw several instructors exchange glances. One of them made a note on a data pad. Kriegnack laughed from somewhere in the crowd. The soft skin can barely lift his own weight. Jake ignored him and moved to the next station. The tests continued throughout the morning. There was a speed test where Zephyrites completed a course so fast that Jake could barely see them move. When he ran it, his time was decent by human standards, but put him near the bottom of all recruits. The endurance test was a long-distance run. Jake did better here, managing to outlast some of the stronger but slower species. But he was still far from the top performers. The worst test was the durability assessment. Recruits were subjected to impacts from padded mechanical arms to test their natural defenses. The Kelthons barely felt the impacts through their armor. The Vraxian scales absorbed most of the force. When it was Jake's turn, even the light impacts left bruises on his arms. Incredible. one instructor muttered. Their bodies have almost no natural protection. By midday, Jake was exhausted, sore, and ranked near the bottom in almost every category. He sat in the mess hall, eating food that the station's computers had specially prepared for human biology, and tried not to think about how badly the morning had gone. A shadow fell across his table. Jake looked up to see Avraxian, one of the recruits from his group. It was Rekthar, if Jake remembered the name correctly. "May I sit?" Rekthar asked. Jake gestured to the bench across from him. The Vraxian sat down carefully, his massive frame making the furniture creak. "I wanted to apologize," Rekthar said. "Some of us have been unkind about your performance today. It was wrong of us. You are doing your best with what nature gave you." Jake set down his fork. "I appreciate that, but you don't need to apologize. The numbers don't lie. I am weaker and slower than almost everyone here." "Perhaps," Rekthar said thoughtfully, "but I have been thinking about what Commander Vokthor said. He told us not to show off or hide weaknesses. You did not try to hide anything. You gave honest effort in every test. That takes courage. It takes stupidity." Kriegnak's voice came from behind them. The Kelthon walked up to their table, his armored body making heavy clanking sounds. The human should quit now before he gets hurt. Or worse, before he gets someone else hurt in training. Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced it down. Getting into a fight on his first day would not help anything. "I'm not quitting," he said quietly. "Then you are a fool," Kriegnak said. He turned and walked away. Rekthar watched him go, then looked back at Jake. Kriegnak fought in actual combat before coming here. He lost many friends. I think he worries that weakness in a unit will lead to more deaths. He is not being cruel, just practical from his point of view. "I understand," Jake said, "but he's wrong about me being a liability. Give me time." The afternoon brought tactical simulations, and Jake started to feel more hopeful. The tests involved planning and problem solving, not just physical ability. Recruits were given scenarios and had to explain how they would respond. One scenario involved defending a position against superior numbers. Most recruits described straightforward plans involving direct combat. When it was Jake's turn, he surprised everyone by suggesting they abandon the position entirely. "The goal is to defend the position, not abandon it," Instructor Salmi said. "With respect, ma'am," Jake replied, "the goal is to complete the mission. If the position itself isn't strategically important, then defending it against superior numbers is just wasting resources. I would relocate to a position where we have the advantage and force the enemy to come to us on our terms." Salmi was quiet for a moment. "That is an unusual interpretation, but not wrong," Commander Vokthor said. He had been observing from the back of the room. "The human shows creative thinking. Continue." The day ended with a briefing about the next phase of training, which would focus on combat skills. Jake returned to his quarters feeling slightly better about things. Yes, he was physically outmatched by almost everyone here, but he had shown that he could think tactically. That had to count for something. He was about to climb into bed when his door chimed. Jake opened it to find Rekthar standing in the corridor. "I wanted to give you this," the Vraxian said, holding out a data pad. "It contains information about Vraxian combat techniques. Our martial arts are built around using forearms and our natural strength. I thought perhaps studying them might give you ideas for working with us in team exercises." Jake took the pad, surprised. "Thank you. That's really thoughtful," Rekthar nodded. "I have a feeling about you, human. I think you are going to surprise a lot of people here, including yourself." After Rekthar left, Jake sat at his desk and opened the data pad. He spent the next 2 hours studying Vraxian fighting techniques, not just to understand them, but to find their weaknesses. Because if he was going to survive combat training, he needed every advantage he could find. Humans had survived on Earth by being the smartest, not the strongest. Jake planned to bring that same philosophy here. Let the others rely on their natural gifts. He would rely on his brain, his adaptability, and his refusal to give up. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But Jake Morrison was ready to face them. He had not come billions of miles just to fail on the first day. He was here to prove that humans belonged in the galaxy, and he was going to do exactly that no matter what it took. Week 2 began with hand-to-hand combat training, and Jake knew this would be his biggest challenge yet. The training hall was massive, with padded floors and walls to prevent serious injuries. Recruits from all species gathered in groups, stretching and preparing for the day's work. Instructor Salmi stood at the center of the hall, her armored form imposing even among the crowd of warriors. "Combat is the foundation of everything we do," she announced. "Your weapons may fail. Your technology may malfunction. But your body and your training will always be with you." She walked around the hall, her eyes moving from recruit to recruit. Each species has developed fighting styles based on their natural advantages. Vraxians use their forearms and strength to overwhelm opponents. Kelthans use their armor to outlast attackers. Zephyrits use speed to strike and retreat before enemies can respond. Jake listened carefully, making mental notes. He had spent the past week studying every species represented at the academy, learning about their biology, their fighting styles, and most importantly, their vulnerabilities. Every advantage came with a weakness, and Jake was determined to find them all. "Today you will spar with partners from different species," Salmi continued. "This will teach you how to fight against opponents who do not move or think like you do. Remember, this is training. The goal is to learn, not to injure." Jake found himself paired with Rekthar, the Vraxian who had been kind to him. The massive alien looked down at him with concern. "I will try to be gentle," Rekthar said. "Don't hold back," Jake replied. "I need to learn how to fight someone like you for real." They moved to an open space on the mat. Other pairs were already sparring around them, and the sounds of combat filled the hall. Jake saw a Kelthon throw a Zephyrite across the room, saw two Vraxians grappling with all 8 of their combined arms. Rekthar bowed in the Vraxian style, then took a fighting stance. Jake did the same, keeping his center of gravity low and his hands up. The Vraxian moved first, reaching out with 2 arms to grab Jake. It would have worked against most opponents. But Jake had spent hours studying Vraxian combat footage. He knew that when they reached with their upper arms, their lower arms pulled back slightly for balance. Jake didn't try to block the grab. Instead, he moved forward and to the right, slipping past Rekthar's reach. As he moved, he struck hard at the joint between the Vraxian's upper and lower left arms, a spot he had identified as vulnerable in his research. Rekthar made a surprised sound and his left arms went momentarily weak. Jake followed up with strikes to nerve clusters in the Vraxian's leg, points that all humanoid species shared regardless of size or strength. Rekthar went down on one knee, shock clear on his face. Jake could have pressed the attack, but this was training, not war. He stepped back and offered his hand to help the Vraxian up. The training hall had gone quiet. Every eye was on them. Rekthar took Jake's hand and stood up, working his left arms to get feeling back into them. "How did you do that?" "You are half my size." "I studied your fighting style," Jake said simply. "I found the weak points." Instructor Salmi approached them, her expression unreadable. "Human, explain what you just did." Jake felt nervous with everyone watching, but he spoke clearly. Vraxians are incredibly strong, and having 4 arms is a huge advantage. But the joint connecting their upper and lower arms has a nerve cluster that causes temporary weakness when struck correctly. And despite their strength, they have the same basic nerve structure in their legs as most humanoid species. "You studied Vraxian biology?" Salmi asked. "I studied everyone's biology," Jake admitted. "I had to. I can't match any of you in strength or speed or natural defenses, so I needed a different advantage." Krieganak pushed through the crowd, his armor gleaming under the training hall lights. Lucky shot against a friend who was holding back. "Let me show you what real combat looks like, Softskin." Jake's heart was pounding, but he nodded. "Okay." They moved to the center of the mat. Kriegnack took a Kelthon fighting stance, which involved presenting his armored body forward while keeping his joints protected. It was a defensive style that relied on outlasting opponents. The Kelthon attacked with methodical precision, throwing strikes that Jake had to dodge rather than block. One hit from those armored fists would end the match immediately. Jake moved constantly, circling and retreating, looking for an opening. Krieganak was good, very good, but Jake had studied Kelthon combat footage too. He knew that their armor, while nearly impenetrable, limited their flexibility. There were certain directions they couldn't move quickly. Jake waited for his moment. When Kriegnack threw a straight punch, Jake moved inside his reach, too close for the Kelthon to hit him effectively. Before Kriegnack could adjust, Jake struck at the gaps in his armor. The joints where plates met and softer material showed through. The Kelthon grunted and tried to back away, but Jake stayed close, continuing to strike at weak points. He aimed for joints, for the soft tissue around Kriegnack's neck, for the spots where armor couldn't protect. After 30 seconds of this, Kriegnack tapped the mat, signaling surrender. He stepped back, breathing hard. "You fight dirty," the Kelthon said, but there was respect in his voice now. "I fight smart," Jake corrected. "There's a difference." Commander Vokthor had entered the training hall without anyone noticing. His forearms were crossed as he watched the scene unfold. "Interesting," he said, his deep voice carrying across the hall. "Very interesting indeed." He walked to where Jake stood, looking down at him with those alien eyes. "Humans do not have armor or extra limbs or enhanced speed. So you find other ways to win?" "Yes, sir," Jake said. "That's what we do. We adapt." Over the next few days, everything changed. The other recruits started watching Jake differently. Some asked him questions about tactics. Others wanted to spar with him to test themselves. Even Kriegnack seemed less hostile, though he still didn't trust humans completely. Jake found himself working with recruits from different species, sharing ideas and learning from each other. He taught them about finding weaknesses and adapting tactics on the fly. They taught him about their combat styles and how to work with their natural abilities. Rekthar became a close friend, often eating meals with Jake and discussing strategy. The Vraxian had a sharp mind behind all that muscle, and he understood what Jake was trying to do. "You are changing how we think about combat," Rekthar said one evening as they sat in the mess hall. "Before you came, we all relied on our natural gifts. Vraxians use strength, Kelthons use armor, Zephyrites use speed, but you showed us that intelligence and preparation can beat any natural advantage." Jake shook his head. "I didn't beat anyone. I just evened the playing field a little. In a real fight with real stakes, any of you could take me." "Perhaps," Rekthar said, "but perhaps not. You gave me something to think about, human. You made me question assumptions I have held all my life." The following week brought weapons training, and Jake continued to surprise everyone. He couldn't match the specialized abilities of other species on their own weapons, but he could use any weapon adequately. More importantly, he understood tactics that none of them had considered. When Instructor Salmi demonstrated a Kelthon plasma rifle and explained that it was designed for defensive positions, Jake asked if it could be modified for offensive use. When a Zephyrite showed off their speed with a blade weapon, Jake asked if that same speed could be used for rapid equipment deployment instead of just combat. The instructors started calling on him more often, asking for his perspective on problems. Commander Vokthor watched everything with interest, saying little but missing nothing. One evening, as Jake was returning to his quarters, he found Kriegnack waiting in the corridor. The Kelthon stood with his arms crossed, his expression serious. "I owe you an apology, human," Kriegnack said. "I judged you based on your physical weakness. I did not see your mental strength." "That was foolish of me," Jake smiled. "You were protecting your unit. I understand that. But I hope you see now that I won't be a liability." "I see more than that," Kriegnack said. "I see that you might be the most dangerous recruit in this entire academy. Not because you are strong, but because you think 3 steps ahead of everyone else." As Jake lay in bed that night, he thought about how far he had come in just 2 weeks. He had arrived as a joke, someone everyone expected to fail. Now recruits from across the galaxy were learning from him, but Jake knew the real challenges were still ahead. Combat training was just the beginning. Soon they would move on to advanced tactics, team operations, and finally the graduation exercise that every recruit feared. He needed to be ready. The briefing room fell silent as Commander Vokthor activated the holographic display. 8 weeks had passed since training began, and now the final test had arrived. Every recruit knew this moment would come, but that didn't make it any less intimidating. "This is your graduation exercise," Vokthor announced. "You will defend a simulated colony settlement against an attacking force. The attackers will be your instructors, using full military equipment and tactics. You will have limited resources, outdated defensive systems, and no orbital support." The hologram showed a small settlement with a dozen buildings, surrounded by rough terrain. It looked vulnerable and exposed. "No recruit class has ever won this exercise," Salmi added. "It is designed to be unwinnable. The goal is to see how long you can last and how well you work together under impossible conditions. Most classes survive between 2 and 3 hours before being overwhelmed." Jake studied the hologram carefully. The settlement had obvious defensive positions, but they were all predictable. Any experienced attacker would know exactly where to expect defenders and how to neutralize them. "You have 24 hours to prepare," Vokthor continued. "Use them wisely. The exercise begins tomorrow at dawn. After the briefing, the recruits gathered in their common area to discuss strategy. The room was full of nervous energy. Even the most confident warriors looked worried. "We should fortify the main buildings," suggested a Vraxian named Korth. "Use our strength to build barriers." "No. We need mobile defense," countered Slixara, one of the Zephyrite recruits. "Use our speed to hit them from multiple angles." The argument continued, with each species wanting to use their natural advantages. Jake listened quietly, thinking. After several minutes of increasingly heated debate, he stood up. "We're thinking about this wrong," he said. The room went quiet. Over the past weeks, Jake had earned enough respect that recruits listened when he spoke. "This exercise is designed for us to fail," Jake continued. "The instructors expect us to defend the settlement conventionally. They've seen that strategy hundreds of times. They know how to beat it. So what do you suggest?" Kriegnack asked. "That we abandon the settlement?" "Not abandon," Jake said. "Transform. Instead of thinking of it as a place to defend, we think of it as a weapon we can use against them." He walked to the holographic display and manipulated the controls, zooming in on different areas around the settlement. "The instructors will expect us to stay in defensive positions. What if we don't? What if we make the entire area a battlefield, where we control what happens?" Rekethar leaned forward, his forearms crossed thoughtfully. "Explain." Jake spent the next hour laying out his plan. It was risky and unconventional, combining tactics from human military history with the unique abilities of each alien species. He suggested using Vraxian strength not for defense but for rapid terrain modification. Kelthon armor would be used for mobile cover during aggressive actions. Zephyrite speed would allow rapid redeployment, making their smaller force seem larger. "This is crazy," Slixara said when he finished. "If it fails, we will look like fools." "If we defend conventionally, we will definitely fail," Jake countered. "I've studied the records. No class has ever lasted more than 4 hours using traditional tactics. This way we at least have a chance to do something different." "I am in," Rekthar said firmly. "Jake has been right about everything else. I trust his judgment." One by one, other recruits agreed. Even Kriegnack, who had been Jake's harshest critic at the beginning, nodded his armored head. "The human is right. We have nothing to lose and everything to gain." They spent the night preparing. Jake divided everyone into teams based on abilities and assigned specific roles. Some would be visible defenders drawing attention. Others would be hidden, waiting to strike. Every recruit had multiple fallback positions and alternative plans. Rekthar found Jake just before dawn, checking equipment one last time. "Are you nervous?" the Vraxian asked. "Terrified," Jake admitted. "If this doesn't work, I'll have let down everyone who trusted me." "Then we will fail together," Rekthar said with what might have been a smile. "That is what teams do." The simulation began as the sun rose over the artificial landscape. The instructors approached in standard assault formation, professional and confident. They had done this exercise hundreds of times and knew exactly what to expect. What they found instead confused them. The settlement appeared almost abandoned, with only minimal defenses and obvious weak points in its perimeter. A few defenders were visible, but far fewer than expected. Commander Vokthor studied the scene through his tactical display. Something felt wrong. "Advance carefully," he ordered. "Watch for traps." The instructors moved forward in disciplined groups. When they reached the settlement's outer buildings, the first surprise hit them. The Vraxian team had spent all night modifying the terrain, creating hidden positions and collapse points. As instructors advanced, carefully prepared sections of ground gave way, disrupting their formations. Before they could recover, Zephyrite teams struck from unexpected angles, not engaging directly, but forcing the instructors to split their attention. When the instructors turned to respond, Kelthon defenders appeared from different positions, their armor allowing them to hold key points while more mobile teams relocated. The instructors adapted quickly, as professionals would. But every time they countered one tactic, the recruits shifted to another. Jake had planned for this, creating multiple layers of strategy that could be adjusted on the fly. From his command position, Jake coordinated everything through their communication network. He watched the tactical display and called out instructions, but he also listened to his team leaders. When Slixara suggested a flanking opportunity, he approved it immediately. When Kriegnack reported a weakness in the instructor's left flank, Jake shifted resources to exploit it. An hour passed, then 2. The instructors had expected to be celebrating victory by now. Instead, they were being pushed back, forced to constantly react to situations they hadn't anticipated. "This is not normal recruit behavior," Instructor Salmi said over the command channel. "They are fighting like veterans." "They are fighting like humans," Vokthor replied, watching Jake's command position on his tactical display. Adapting constantly, using terrain and teamwork instead of relying on individual strength. The battle continued. The instructors brought their superior experience and firepower to bear, and slowly they began gaining ground. But it cost them. Every meter they advanced came at the price of simulated casualties and wasted resources. At the 3-hour mark, Vokthor checked his tactical assessment. By this point in previous exercises, the recruits would be nearly defeated. Instead, his instructor force had lost almost half their strength and still hadn't captured a single objective. At 3 hours and 30 minutes, something unprecedented happened. The recruits launched a coordinated counterattack that hit 3 positions simultaneously. Vraxian strength, Kelthon defense, and Zephyrite speed worked in perfect coordination, supporting each other's weaknesses and amplifying each other's strengths. The instructors found themselves pushed back to their starting positions. Vokthor stood in silence, studying his display. Around him, veteran instructors looked shocked. "This wasn't supposed to be possible." "Commander," Salmi said quietly, "we are losing." Vokthor watched for another few minutes as his forces continued to be outmaneuvered and outfought. Finally, he activated the emergency communication channel that would reach every participant. "All forces cease fire. Exercise concluded." In the command center, Jake heard the announcement and felt his legs go weak. Around the settlement, recruits stopped moving, not quite believing what they had just heard. "By all military standards," Vokthor's voice continued, "the recruit force has achieved a decisive victory. This is the first time in the history of this academy that recruits have defeated the final exercise." Cheers erupted from the recruits. Rekthar lifted Jake off his feet in a crushing hug that would have broken bones if he had used his full strength. Kriegnak approached and offered his arm in a gesture of deep respect. But Jake barely heard the celebration. He was thinking about what this meant. They hadn't just passed a test. They had proven that working together, combining different strengths and thinking creatively, could overcome any challenge. It was a lesson the galaxy needed to learn. And Jake Morrison, the human everyone had thought was too weak to survive training, had been the one to teach it. The debriefing room was packed with every recruit and instructor from the academy. Jake stood at the front with his team, still trying to process what had just happened. His uniform was dirty and torn from the exercise, and exhaustion pulled at every muscle in his body. But his mind was clear and sharp. Commander Vokthor stood before them, his forearms behind his back in a formal posture. The massive Vraxian's expression was unreadable as he surveyed the assembled recruits. "In 200 cycles of operation," Vokthor began, his deep voice filling the room, "this academy has trained thousands of warriors from hundreds of species. The final exercise has been failed by every single class. Until today." He paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. "What you accomplished was not just a victory in a simulation. You demonstrated something far more important. You showed that the old ways of thinking about warfare are incomplete." Instructor Salmi stepped forward, her scarred armor gleaming under the lights. "I have fought in actual combat for 30 cycles," she said. "I have seen battles won and lost. I thought I understood warfare completely. Today, recruits with only 8 weeks of training taught me that I was wrong." She turned to Jake. "Human Morrison, your species has been part of the galactic community for less than 1 cycle. Yet you have changed how we think about combat, not because you are stronger or faster, but because you see possibilities we have been blind to." Jake felt his face getting hot. "I didn't do it alone, ma'am. Everyone on the team contributed. I just helped coordinate." "That is leadership," Vokthor said. "Understanding that your role is not to be the strongest warrior, but to make every warrior stronger. You used each species according to their gifts, covering their weaknesses and amplifying their strengths." Rekthar stepped forward from the group of recruits. "Permission to speak, Commander?" Vokthor nodded. "When Jake arrived, many of us thought he would fail," Rekthar said. "We saw his physical limitations and assumed he could not be a warrior. We were wrong. He showed us that the deadliest weapon is not the strongest body, but the sharpest mind. He taught us to question our assumptions and think creatively about problems. Kriegnak moved to stand beside Rekethar. The Kelthon's armored hand rested on Jake's shoulder. I was his loudest critic. I called him weak and useless. I am ashamed of that now. This human is neither weak nor useless. He is perhaps the most dangerous recruit in this academy, because he fights with his intelligence rather than just his body. Other recruits began speaking up, sharing how Jake's approach had changed their thinking. Slixera talked about learning to combine Zephyrite speed with Vraxian strength. Korth discussed how studying human tactical history had given him new ideas about using his natural abilities. Vokthor listened to all of it, his expression thoughtful. When the room finally quieted, he spoke again. Effective immediately, this academy's curriculum will be modified. We will incorporate human tactical concepts into all training. More importantly, we will emphasize adaptability and creative thinking alongside physical conditioning. What the human has shown us is that warfare is not static. It evolves. And those who cannot evolve will eventually lose. The formal ceremony lasted another hour. Jake and his entire team received the highest honors the Academy could grant. But more than the medals and recognition, what mattered to Jake was the change he could see in how the different species looked at each other. They weren't just separate groups anymore. They were beginning to think of themselves as one unified force. Graduation came 2 weeks later. Jake stood with his class, wearing the formal uniform of a Galactic Defense Initiative officer. His family had sent a video message that played during the ceremony. His mother cried. His father smiled with pride. His younger sister said she wanted to join the academy when she was old enough. After the ceremony, Jake found Commander Vokthor standing alone on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. "Commander?" Jake said quietly. Vokthor turned. "Officer Morrison, I was hoping to speak with you privately." "Is something wrong, sir?" "On the contrary, I wanted to thank you." The Vraxian gestured to the stars beyond the window. "I have been training warriors for 50 cycles. I thought I knew everything about warfare. You reminded me that there is always more to learn, especially from those who are different from us." Jake joined him at the window. "I was just trying not to fail, sir. You did far more than that. You changed how an entire generation of officers will think about warfare." Vokthor paused. "I have recommended you for advanced command training. Earth's military has also requested you return to help train their forces in galactic combat doctrine." "The choice is yours." Jake thought about it. Part of him wanted to go home to see his family and his planet, but he also knew that his work here wasn't finished. "I'd like to stay, sir. I think I can do more good here, helping to build bridges between different species." Vokthor nodded as if he had expected that answer. "Then I look forward to serving with you, officer. The galaxy is going to need people like you in the years to come." 10 years later, the predictions proved true. A hostile force emerged from beyond explored space, threatening every world in the galactic community. The defense fleet that assembled to meet them was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Vraxians worked alongside humans, using combined tactics that played to both species' strengths. Kelthans coordinated with Zephrites, heavy armor supporting rapid strike forces. Species that had been rivals for centuries fought side by side, united by training that emphasized cooperation over competition. Jake Morrison, now a senior commander, stood on the bridge of the defense fleet's lead ship. Around him, officers from a dozen species worked in seamless coordination. Rekthar served as his executive officer. Kriegnak commanded the armored divisions. Slixara led reconnaissance forces. "Enemy fleet approaching," the tactical officer reported. "They outnumber us 5 to 1. Officers around the bridge tensed, but Jake smiled calmly. "Then it's an even fight." The battle that followed became legendary. The defending forces didn't just win, they won decisively. The enemy had expected traditional warfare, each species fighting according to rigid doctrines. Instead, they faced a fluid, adaptive force that constantly surprised them with unexpected tactics and perfect coordination. When the last enemy ship retreated, the bridge erupted in cheers. Officers from different species embraced, celebrating their shared victory. Rekthar approached Jake, his forearms spread in a Vraxian gesture of respect. "We did it, my friend. Just like in training." "Better than training," Jake replied. This time, it was real. A message came through from Supreme Commander Vokthor, who was coordinating the defense from the Central Command Station. His aged face appeared on the main view screen. All forces, this is Supreme Command. Today you have proven what I learned 10 years ago from a single human recruit. The strength of our alliance is not in any individual species, but in our ability to learn from each other and work together. You have shown the galaxy what we can accomplish when we set aside old prejudices and embrace new ways of thinking. After the battle, Jake stood alone in his quarters, looking at a picture of his younger self on the day he arrived at the academy. That nervous young man had thought he was going to represent Earth. He had no idea he would end up changing the galaxy. A chime at his door interrupted his thoughts. It was a priority message from Earth. Jake opened it and saw it was from his sister, who had graduated from the academy herself 3 years ago. "Saw your performance in the battle," she wrote. "You made us all proud. Mom and Dad say hello. Oh, and guess what? The academy just accepted its largest class ever. Recruits from 40 different species, all of them trained in the methods you pioneered. They're calling it the Morrison Doctrine now. Thought you should know." Jake smiled. The Morrison Doctrine. He had just been trying to survive and do his best. He never imagined his ideas would spread so far. Another message came through, this one from Commander Vokthor. "Officer Morrison, I am retiring next cycle. I have recommended you as my replacement to lead the academy. The council agrees. Will you accept?" Jake read the message twice. Leading the academy meant shaping the next generation of galactic defenders. It meant continuing the work of building understanding between species. It meant ensuring that the lessons learned over the past decade would not be forgotten. He began typing his response. "Sir, I would be honored to accept, but only if we expand the program to include more species and more diverse tactical training. If I've learned anything, it's that we're always stronger when we learn from each other." The reply came back within minutes. "I would expect nothing less from you. Congratulations, Commandant Morrison." Jake looked out the window at the stars, thinking about the journey that had brought him here. He had arrived at the academy as the weakest recruit, someone everyone expected to fail. He was leaving as the architect of a new way of warfare that had saved the galaxy. But more than that, he had helped dozens of species learn to truly work together. That was the real victory. Not winning battles, but building understanding. Not proving humans were strong, but proving that strength came in many forms. The galaxy would face other threats in the future. But now it would face them united, with warriors trained to think creatively, adapt constantly,